Hi, I'm Lenora Bresler, and welcome to the Bible Delight in the Details. It is Easter. Happy Easter. Happy Resurrection Sunday. I want to give you a short version today of the lesson that I gave my adult to Sunday school class this morning at Southside Baptist Church. You know, I think we've talked on earlier sessions that the three festivals in the spring that the Jews were commanded by God in Leviticus chapter 23 to observe they all prophesy about the work of Jesus Christ when he was first here on earth. And then there came Pentecost, and then there's a break of several months, and then the fall festivals, which really are talking about what will happen when he comes back to judge and to rule the world. Now, we've talked for about a week and a half about how Christ is our Passover lamb. But there are two festivals that follow very closely on the heels of Passover, so closely that most Jewish people thought of them as one thing, but they were really separate festivals. Now, first was Passover. That would have occurred beginning on the evening of Maundy Thursday for us, for the Christians. And then going into Friday. Saturday would have been considered the festival of unleavened bread. We talked about that yesterday. And then what would become Sunday, Easter Sunday, was the festival of first fruits. Now, when you understand about this, it becomes very obvious why it was so appropriate that Christ would get up, would be resurrected on the festival of first fruits. When you think about harvest, most of us think about the fall. But in Israel, the first of the harvests was the barley crop. And I learned from one of my students this morning, something I did not know, which was that the barley actually had become a representation, a symbol of the nation of Israel itself. Now, that's very interesting because we are told in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 20, that Christ, because he was the first to be resurrected, was the first fruits. He's our first fruit. So there's a direct tie by Paul with regard to this festival. So we need to know a little more about it. The barley crop was the first of the crops of the year to be harvested. And this is what would be done. Several months before, when the barley crop had just gotten started, just taken root, the high priest would go out into what you might call the national barley crop garden, and he would put a red or scarlet cord around a certain plant that looked like it was particularly healthy, particularly hardy. And then the barley would be allowed to grow up. Now, on the day of the Feast of First Fruits, the high priest, along with some of the other priests, would go back into this national barley garden, and 3 times a priest would stand over the barley crop that had the scarlet cord around it and would ask, is this the one? Is this the time? And after having done this 3 times and being assured that yes, it was the one and it was time, only then would he take the barley. It would go immediately to the temple, where it would be waved in front of the Lord, in front of the altar, in gratitude and appreciation for this first harvest, and also asking that God would provide additional harvests as the year went on. Now, this is absolutely fascinating because, of course, this is exactly what Christ was living out in real life at the same exact time. His sacrifice was accepted by God, and so God had brought forth the harvest of resurrection for his Son. But it would only be the first of many resurrections. We know that the Gospels say that even during that weekend, there were some dead people who actually got up out of the graves. They were resurrected after Jesus' death. But regardless of that, we know that we, the Christians throughout the centuries thereafter, we are those later crops. We are the later harvests. Now, this also gives new understanding to something else. You remember when Mary saw Jesus in the garden, and she fell at his feet and grabbed onto him, and he told her, "Don't touch me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father." A lot of people are like, what is all that about? What does that even mean? Well, when you understand the first fruits ceremony, all of a sudden that becomes very clear. Because you see, when the barley was chosen, it had to be taken immediately to the temple to be presented by the high priest to the Lord as an offering. And it had to be, quote, accepted. It had to be acceptable to God. And only if it was acceptable to God would there be, theoretically, the guarantee, or at least the hope of future harvests. Christ when he got up that morning, he obviously at some point must have gone back to heaven. He was to be presented, just like that first fruit was going to be presented to God. And so he took a little time with Mary, but he obviously had somewhere else he needed to be. We also know that in addition to fulfilling whatever he needed to do to be the first fruits, to do the ceremonial prophetic thing, he also took time that day to meet with some of his disciples, 2 of them on the road to Emmaus, where he opened up their eyes and showed them how everything in the Old Testament, everything pointed to him. He also apparently had some kind of a private meeting that day with Peter. Wouldn't you have loved to have been a fly on the wall of that conversation? That brought Peter back into communion. And then he also, of course, appeared toward the end of the day in the upper room to many, many people that were gathered there. So Christ, always doing what he needed to do to fulfill prophecy and to stay in good relationship with his Father, but never forgetting his friends, his students, his disciples, and always having us, the future generations, also in mind. I hope you're having a blessed Easter. Join me tomorrow and all the days to follow on the Bible, Delight in the Details. I'm Lenora Bresler. Happy, happy Easter. He is risen. He is risen indeed.